Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to another Lightroom tutorial. It's time for another color grading video. And on this image, I'll show you how I'm adding very intense, vibrant sunset colors with just a little bit of color grading. This can not only be done in Lightroom Classic, but also in the Camera Raw editor of Photoshop. But let's not waste any more time. Alright, here we are in Lightroom, and the very first thing I usually like to do is to change the camera profile right here. In most of the cases I'm just going with Adobe Standard, since this will make the image a little more neutral, so I have more control over the colors and the contrast myself. Then for the next step, before I'm starting to work on the exposure of the image, I'm going to adjust the white balance to my liking. In this case, since I want to have very strong, vibrant sunset colors in this image, I'm going to turn up the temperature quite a bit. Okay, the temperature does look good. Now let's also introduce a little bit of tint. Okay, I don't want to overdo it, so I'm very careful here. So that first change might not look like much, but for this kind of color grading, it's one small step after the other to get a nice result. So let's continue adjusting the tones a little bit so we can get a better feeling of what we need to change in order to get a sunset image. Right away, I think this image is way too bright. Although there is no overexposure, I still want to make it a little darker. So let's drop the exposure. Alright, that's better. Now let's also bring down the highlights. It starts to look very dark, but don't worry, we will fix that. For now, let's bring up the shadows. And now to get back brightness, I'm going to increase the whites. And I'm always paying close attention to the histogram, but that looks pretty good. And with those steps, we just have spread the histogram a little more. To me, this way the image looks much more pleasing. Of course, we can also add a little bit of contrast back. And let's also introduce some texture. But that looks really nice. Now back to the color grading. After doing all those tone adjustments, you usually have a better idea of what to do. First off, I'm going to increase the vibrance. I want this image to be saturated, so let's add quite a bit here. Alright, and from this point on I want to use local adjustments. In this case, for this image, it just means I'm going to add a few gradiated filters. Usually I go for the sky first. And in the first step, of course, you could adjust the temperature of the white balance again to give those clouds a warmer look like this, but I have something different in mind. I'm going to use this gradiated filter to bring down the texture and the clarity, which will just make those clouds a lot softer. Let's also adjust the foreground real quick. I think this part needs to be brighter, so I'm bringing up the exposure. Also, I want to bring up the whites for the same effect. Alright, and at this point, here comes the color grading part. I basically want to warm up the highlights of the whole image. Of course, I could use the split toning, but I want to target the highlights more specifically. And for this reason, I'm going to create a gradiated filter outside of this image, just like this. You can see this one just covers the whole image this way. Let's reset it real quick though. And since I want to target a specific luminance range, we can simply use a luminance range mask. Let's activate the setting so you can see the mask. Right now everything is affected by it, but we only want the highlights, so I'm going to filter out the darker luminance range. Just like that, by increasing that range slider down there. And you can see less and less of the image is red, and we're going to increase this until we only have the highlights left. Just like that. Also, in case you have a very smooth edge, I want to increase the smoothness a bit, but that should look pretty good. So let's deactivate the setting. Now with this luminance range mask and the highlights selected, I want to increase the temperature. And now watch what happens. We get this very warm look in the clouds. without touching the shadows. So that's exactly what we want for this image. I think I'm going with something like this. It might not look like much, but we will adjust the highlights later once more, so let's continue. With this way I also want to target the shadows. So again, I'm creating another gradiated filter outside of this image. Again, let's reset it. Then let's add a luminance range mask once more to this gradiated filter. And since we are targeting the shadows, I'm going to filter out the highlights by bringing down this range slider. Actually, I might want to include some of the midtones as well, so I'm not going as low. And I want to bring up the smoothness just a notch. Now we have targeted the shadows, so let's make them a little colder by bringing down the temperature here. Alright, in this case we could also play around with the tint, giving them more of a purplish color tone. But I think this looks pretty good. Okay, then that's it for the local adjustments. You can already see we have a much warmer image with a way stronger color contrast between the highlights and the shadows. But now comes the part where the colors really start to change. First off, for sunset colors, a really helpful trick is to just use the tone curve. In here I'm going to grab the red channel and use the point for the highlights and just drag it to the left. This is a very strong effect. It will change the brightness of your highlights, so beware of overexposure, but this looks good. Then next, for this shot we can actually skip the HSL panel, but I want to head straight to the split toning. And I guess you might already know this is a very powerful tool right here. Usually I'm starting with the highlights, work on the midtones a little bit, and then go adjust the shadows. So for the highlights, of course, we want to have a very saturated warm color tone. So I want to adjust the hue a little bit to go more into the yellow range. I guess that looks good. And I want to turn up the saturation even more here. I really want to kind of overdo it, so we get those 6 sunset colors. That looks awesome. Then we can further boost those sunset colors by adjusting the midtones. But depending on your taste, you could also apply a cold color tone to the midtones. I just prefer those images to be warmer. So again, let's go somewhere in this range. Actually, I might want to go more into the orange range here. So we do have some more color variety in this shot. And again, let's bring up the saturation. Alright, awesome. And finally, let's target the shadows and just add a cold color tone here so we get some color contrast. This seems to be a good color tone, but for the shadows I'm going with a very low saturation. Alright, perfect. And now the final color grading will be happening in the calibration tab all the way down. I personally just play around with the sliders a little bit until I get some satisfying colors. In most cases though, however, I'm going to drop the blue primary hue, since this will just introduce some more red tones, it seems. Just like that. Now let's also drop the red primary hue for this image. And I also want to bring up the saturation here. Alright, and that's it for the sunset color grading inside of Lightroom. You can see we have changed this image quite dramatically. If you want to push this look further, then I would suggest to keep on watching this video, since I will be finishing the whole post-processing. That means I will load this image into Photoshop, use a few plugins to enhance the colors some more. But before I jump into Photoshop, let's first sharpen this image. Alright, and I guess I want to use the spot removal tool to get rid of those sensor spots. By the way, if you're wondering what this mask right here is, it's just the visualize spot settings. Alright, that looks good. I'm going to do some final cleaning up in Photoshop. For now, let's right click on the thumbnail, go to edit in and edit in Photoshop. Okay, I do have to remove a few objects here because they are annoying. In this case, I'm duplicating that layer just to have a backup. And now let's zoom in, use the spot healing brush and just paint over a few sensor spots, which I have overlooked in Lightroom. Alright, that's it for the cleaning part. Then let's merge those two layers. Next, I think I want to target the highlights again and change the colors up a little bit. For this, I'm going to apply, let me see, I think I'm going with a curves adjustment layer. And you can see I'm going to make use of this layer mask. And to target the highlights, I want to create a luminosity mask. For this reason, I'm using the TK panel plugin, which is this little panel right here. And with those buttons on the right, I can target the highlights. So for example, this would be a very wide range of highlights. And the further down I go, the smaller the highlight range will be. So I want to target only the brightest parts. So this would be a pretty good mask. Let's apply it to our curves adjustment layer. And again, just as in Lightroom, I'm going to the red channel and I want to bring this point to the left. That's much better. You can see when I'm deactivating this, I get way more intense sunset colors in here. Now let's see if I want to do the same for the shadows. Again, I'm going with a curves adjustment layer and I'm using the TK panel for the shadows, just like that. And this time let's go into the blue channel and just bring it up to the left as well. I don't want to have too intense blues here, but just a little bit more. Alright, that looks awesome. Now let me merge those three layers. And at this point I want to check the Nik Collection plugin. So let's see. With the Nik Collection plugin you can get some really crazy effects. So for sunsets, the skylight filter is very helpful. Of course, you need to be careful here. You can see it's pushing those colors way too hard. So let's just bring down the strength. Just a bit. I do want to have a bright sky, so that looks quite good. Then maybe we can add another filter. And here, let's see if the Brilliance Warmth filter is of any use for us. Let's just bring up the warmth just a notch. Alright, let's apply it like this, because I think if I would go on, it's pretty much overdone then. Alright, I think that's it, however, for editing this image. So I hope the color grading part was helpful, as well as the rest of the post-processing. If you have questions left, don't be afraid to ask in the comments, I will try to help. And thank you very much for watching this video.